Welcome back to That's Church. I'm Emily Call, here with my sister Ashley Sanders. We are so excited to introduce today's guest, Michelle Peper. Michelle is a thoughtful and inspiring voice in the world of faith transitions and personal growth. Raised in Southern Idaho in a sixth-generation LDS family, Michelle's journey took a transformative turn when she and her husband Bob stepped away from the LDS Church last October after decades of active participation. Since then, they found a new spiritual home in the First Congregational United Church of Christ and have been redefining what faith and meaning look like for them. Michelle shares her experiences on Instagram at Edge of Inside, where she's built a supportive and healing community for others on similar journeys. She also serves as a crisis counselor with the Trevor Project, a role she describes as one of the most rewarding and challenging things she's ever done. Outside of her incredible work, Michelle loves music, soap making, hiking, pickleball, and spending time with her beloved dogs. We can't wait for you to hear Michelle's story and insights on faith, family, and finding purpose in new and meaningful ways. Let's dive in.
I have really fond memories of growing up. I was really lucky to be in a warm and healthy environment with amazing parents. And they go back in Mormonism to the beginning. Like my ancestors were baptized, were in Nauvoo, came across on the plains on both sides of my family. Wow. All the stuff. So it just goes back to the beginning. And so I was raised LDS. There was just no question about it. And I was raised in Southern Idaho. So, it was a pretty good percentage of LDS people. But my parents, although we were active and engaged and involved, they weren't like overly orthodox. So, I don't remember ever being taught about modesty or, all those kinds of, some of those things that can really make life, traumatic sometimes. We just went to church and did the things, but it never felt cumbersome. It just was, and my parents were pretty chill. Like sometimes we'd go to the store on Sunday or go to Dairy Queen, or my mom drank tea, we always had Coke in the house. So they were just pretty chill. So, I didn't grow up with shame or fear or those kinds of things. I just always believed. I never questioned the church ever. Just, not to say I didn't do all the things I wasn't supposed to do. I did that too. But I just knew, like, even when I did the things I shouldn't do, God still loved me and the church was still true. And, and it was just a normal, nice upbringing.
So what happened over time? How did that shift for you?
So I met my husband. I was accepted to BYU, and I just chose not to go. I got also accepted to LDS Business College. At the time, it's called Ensign College now. And I think we weren't wealthy. We didn't have money. Financially, it just made sense to me. Like, I'm just going to go. It's like a year, maybe two, get a job, I just assumed that, I don't need a career because I'm going to be a wife and a mother. So it doesn't matter. That's just where I was. And I, I had taken all these secretarial type classes in high school. So I was, that's just kind of the path I was on. And Bob, my husband, who grew up Catholic, and he wanted to go to Utah for college because he skis, and he never really skied out. He wanted to go where the skiing was good. Yeah. So everybody tells him, better watch out for the Mormons. They're going to get you. And
I love it.
He got out there and had been reading anti-Mormon literature to make sure he was ready. And honestly, the more he read, the more questions he had. And so he called the missionaries and met with the missionaries and joined the church.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it was very interesting. So
plot twist.
I know, plot twist, right? So sometimes I like to say he really joined because of me, because we were in the same student ward together. So LDS Business College students and University of Utah students went to church together. And he hadn't been baptized just yet. This was October, and I was asked to speak in sacrament meeting, and he was there. And he says to me, in the audience, he looked up and said, "I'm going to marry her." So that's really sweet. And he wasn't baptized yet. Next month he got baptized. So,
That is so cute.
Yeah, that's a nice reason to join, though.
It is, right? But we didn't start dating until like the next summer, but still, I think I like that story.
That's so sweet.
So then we met and got married and just did all the Mormon things, got married in the temple while his mom cried at JB's big boy because she couldn't come in. It was, all the things you think you're doing, you think you're doing a good thing, We did all that and we had 3 kids and we just actually got we've never been overly Orthodox. We're just both, but, the church, when you get in leadership callings and you teach youth and these are the lessons you teach, modesty became a thing and I was teaching it to the kids and I'm raising my kid, we became more Orthodox over time.
Interesting.
Yeah. But still, when we moved to this small town, we live in a small town in Washington. And we moved here, I don't know, 18, 19, 20 years ago. People in the ward thought we were rebellious, because we weren't as Orthodox as it's a very conservative area here. And we just were more lax,
Yeah.
And so we always kind of had a little wild reputation here because we've just never been that intense, but we totally loved the church and believed it and all that. We just didn't like it was more the cultural rules,
It's so dependent on which ward you go to or which area you live in. Like there really are different brands of Mormonism.
There are. Right. And we lived in Dallas, we lived in Houston, we lived in Indianapolis. The church was just different wherever we went. And so when we got here, it felt more like Utah, kind of. It's just a very conservative small town. And, so.
So you live in Utah now?
No, we live in Washington.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was confused.
Yeah, we met and married in Utah and then never went back once we left. But this feels... And so I think because we'd traveled around and been in big cities, it's usually they're a little more liberal. So coming back here, we just weren't that conservative, so.
Yeah.
But there was a time right after we got married, we moved to Southern California and we just stopped going to church. The beach was way more appealing. And so we had about 3 years of inactivity early on. And that was, I would call that our lax disciple years because we just, the beach was just more appealing.
Yes.
But then we moved to Dallas, and one day my husband woke up and said, I'm going to go to church today. And he's like, you don't have to come. I'm like, well, I'll come. So we went, and they had split the stake or the ward or something that day. So the next week, nobody knew that we'd been inactive all this time, but they just thought we were from the other boundary or whatever. So
nice. You just slid right in there.
Yeah, we just slid right in there. And never looked back. We never missed a Sunday again, ever.
Wow.
Unless we were traveling. We never. Just never.
Yeah.
So weird.
I believe that those breaks are needed though. And I took a few months break and I told my bishop straight to his face, we were friends. I just said, I would recommend it. I would recommend that members take a break because, it makes you realize the things you miss. And it also makes you realize some of the things you don't miss. But at least in my case, it made me go back to church with more of a purpose behind
I like
it.
that. Yes. Yeah. And because then you find out what's meaningful.
Yes.
To you.
Yes, exactly.
And I think the beach can be very spiritual and connecting, that can be church in itself.
It
Absolutely.
absolutely is. It absolutely is. I mean, nature in general is just the best cathedral out there.
Amen. Nature church all the way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. So how long have you been out of the church?
Very fresh, 6 months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. When we met, we were still kind of going. So it was like a quiet quitting, you know what I mean? So I was mentally done. I was teaching seminary in 2022 still. I did 3 years of seminary and my daughter was in my class. And so I was like, okay, when they called me, I'm like, I'll stay until she graduates. I'll just help her get through, right? And so when she graduated, I mentally was just done. I'd been deconstructing that last year of seminary, was so hard because I started not believing so many things that were in the lesson manual and I was redacting. And pretty soon I'm just like, I'm a fraud. I can't teach what the church wants me to teach. I'm not doing what they want. So I felt I'm like, since I'd already planned to resign at that point anyway, it just was, the timing was perfect. So I just quit, as soon as seminary ended, like then I stopped wearing garments. I just stopped, like I hadn't paid tithing for at least 6 months already. I was just done. But my husband was not done. He loved church, loved the community. He was deconstructing, but he couldn't, the church was still meaningful to him, and the people, he's very social. So I just, hung in there for him. And then in October, when President Nelson gave that talking conference about think celestial and don't counsel with there's just a lot of things about that talk. We weren't watching, but our son, who's still active, was texting. He says, like, are you listening to this? We're like, what? President Nelson's talk? And we're like, no. And he's like, it's crazy. It's like, he's an active member. And we're like, oh boy. So
wow.
When
so for him to say that means even more.
It really was. So when my husband listened to that talk, he was, that was just for him, that was the final straw. And he called the bishop and said, I need to meet with you. And on Tuesday, he went to the bishop and said, we're not going to be back. Can't do this anymore. I'm done.
Wow. So when we met you were going to the other church, your new church. So you were kind of doing both?
We were, like, I played the organ at our ward and once a month. So I would always go on that month. Oh, look, so when I resigned seminary, I also basically stopped going to Sunday school and all that stuff too. My husband still liked elders quorum, so he would do that, but we would take separate cars. But so I would go once a month and play the organ, and my husband would go once or twice a month, and then we'd go to the UCC church once or twice a month. So we were, just doing both. And then in October, we were just like, okay, we'll just go to the UCC full time, which we do. But it's kind of funny because some friends from the UCC, I was with them last night, and they said, are you still going to the Mormon church sometimes? I'm like, no. There's people in the Mormon church that don't really know. We've quit either. Like, have you been out of town? I'm like, no. It's like, whatever.
You're like, just tell them you still go.
Like, I'm like, I'm like, no, I haven't been out of town. That's all I said. Like,
I'm sure that's a hard transition, especially with the people, like the community. And
it's so interesting because it hasn't been. It's very odd, but we live in a small town, so there's 2 wards in the town, and when you just know all the Mormons, everybody. So you can't really avoid them, and they've been our friends for 20 years. So they're still our friends. So I mean, that's why they ask. Like, we go to lunch, we go to dinner, we have a book group. We're in a book group. We're in a family home evening group that we still sometimes go to. I'm in 2 different lunch groups. Play pickleball, and so they don't know we left
because you're still seeing them on a regular basis.
Every day.
So that's beautiful.
In the community. That's great.
It's been really nice, and some of the ones that know don't want to talk about it, because they're uncomfortable. They don't want to know why, because when I've been all in and people have left, I'm like, I don't know what to say to them because I'm afraid they hate me now, which I don't know why we think those things, but we just get uncomfortable.
Yes.
But so we just try to we just do all the things without talking about church now.
Honestly,
basically.
That's kind of a beautiful transition. And I feel like so often when people leave the church, they no longer hear from their ward members. And that's so devastating for them.
Yes.
And I feel like that's just, so when you said like you go to pickleball and book club and all of these other activities with them, I just wish everybody did it that way, because you're still staying in contact. And I understand that, like, when you leave the church, you don't have that in common anymore. But it is pretty sad to recognize, like, at least for some of my friends who have left the church, for them to realize, like, I guess I had nothing in common with them except that. And that's not every situation, but it is really comforting to hear your situation and hear that you had the opposite experience. That's really wonderful.
I think some of it is a function of being in a really small town.
Right.
I honestly think if we were in a big city, it might not be the same, except for our book group. Our book group is so great. Like,
that's awesome.
The book group started during Black Lives Matter, and they wanted to read, like, the first book we read was Stamped from the Beginning by Ibram Kendi, which, so what you're dealing with. These aren't your normal conservative
Right.
Right. So, so these are our people. These are our people.
Yes.
And you
That's so
know,
cool.
when we were deconstructing, we were telling them we're deacons, you know,
Right.
one of them would say, I don't see how anyone could leave the church. And I'd go, I'm halfway out. You better be careful what you say, you know. And
Right.
we were, you know, and so they knew, and they still loved us, and they were so, and now like 4 of us have left the church. So, but it's just a great book group. So we can't leave them. And then some of the other people, like I'd say church is mostly what we have in common. And when I go to lunch, everybody's talking about church, and I'm just kind of sitting there like, you know,
Yeah.
but they're nice people, and they keep including me, and I don't want to, you know,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
they're my friends. So,
Yeah. And that's a
Yeah.
beautiful
That's
thing.
great.
And I think sometimes we get upset when members of the church, our friends in the church, are sad or upset when their friend leaves. And I think that, I mean, there's obviously multiple layers to that, but if I was going to the gym every day with a friend and she all of a sudden said, hey, I'm not going to go with you anymore, that would be sad on just the seeing each other level every day. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So I do think it's okay for people to mourn their friend leaving in that sense, but you cross the line when you worry about their salvation and their soul.
That's exactly
So
it.
I think there are just different layers to it, but it sounds like you've been able to maintain those friendships, and that's wonderful. I wish that for everyone.
I really do. We really try, my husband too. We really do try. And I appreciate your perspective, because one of my friends did say she felt really sad, and it kind of bugged me. I'm like, well, I said, well, don't be sad for me, but you know, I get it. I do get it. But yes, don't worry about my soul. You know, be sad that maybe you don't see me as much as, you know, but don't worry about my soul.
Yes.
And I think
You
some
know,
people I think also it's important for us to have grace, because our brother left the church fairly recently. And I think at the time I was in a place of like, oh, I'm not worried about you at all. I can see that you are so much happier, you know, and there were people that were worried about them. And I was like, they're not your concern to worry about. For one, we have a different perspective. We want them to have grace, but also it's important we have grace for them. Yeah.
That's what they know, and that's what they believe, and they're certain, you know.
Yes.
That's, you know, and once you've transitioned, you know, if the beauty of having transitioned is you've been in both places, you know, both sides, where they only know the one side and they can't see, and you can't describe it or explain it, and no matter, and that's why I just don't want to have those, sometimes I just don't want to have those conversations, because it doesn't matter what I say. It just makes me look from their perspective lost and deceived and confused, and you know, I don't need to add fuel to their fire, so I just don't say anything, you know.
Right.
I know I had a friend that left the church a while back, well before I, you know, was, she said something about Joseph Smith. I learned a bunch of stuff about Joseph Smith, and I was like, oh, you know, she's one of those conspiracy theorists, you know, she just, you know, and then later I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. 5 years ago, I maybe would have been worried about my brother, you know,
Right.
and so we have to have grace for people wherever they're at.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
For sure.
And I know some people that have deconstructed, and they just really want everyone to deconstruct with them. You know, like, oh, they just want you to know all the things that, and I'm like, I don't, absolutely, because I'm an old woman. I've been in the church for 58 years, right? And I loved it. Why would I want to take that away from somebody else? You know, I loved it. It worked for me at the time.
Wow. I was actually going to ask if you, I mean, at least for me, I think back and like the church has brought me some of the best things in my life. And so whether I stay in it forever or whether I leave at some point, I can never deny the good that it's brought to my life. And I wondered if you feel similarly when you were talking about your husband seeing you and having that feeling.
Oh my goodness. He, you know, when he joined the church, he's like, it wasn't from reading the Book of Mormon or anything like that. He said, they asked me to pray about it. So I did. And I can't deny that I was guided to join. I was told to join, I was told it was true. That's what he said, you know, and now he, you know, but it's not the wrong path.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's just a path. It's just a path. There's millions of paths. The problem is when you're in it, you think it is the only path.
Right.
But when you're out of it, you're like, it's a path and it works for some people.
Yes.
So why do you want to ruin that for them?
Right. And no matter where the path takes you, you still gain something along the way. If someone divorces their spouse, but they had children with this spouse, they don't regret the marriage because they obviously have beautiful children to show for it. So no matter where their path takes them after that, they're still grateful for the journey. I think it's so important because I think so many times we love to say like, you know, my life was dark and then I got the church and now this is it. Like I've won, you know, or like this is the finish line. And it's like spirituality is just not that way. It's up and down. And there's so many different, like you mentioned, there's so many different paths to take. And for each of us, it'll be different.
Right. And the church has done, I mean, you hear the stories where somebody's life was dark and they found the church and it changed everything for the better. And that's great.
Yeah.
But it's still not the end all be all and the only and the this and the that. In my opinion.
Yeah, it might not be the end of their story
anymore, though. So
yeah, that's what
I'm open to, you know.
I know. I was just telling Ashley, we interviewed someone else, and I'm like, I don't want some of my thoughts. I want to edit out because they might change next year. You know, and I don't want people to hold me to that. I don't want people to hear this podcast in 5 years and be like, oh, these were her thoughts. Well, they're not now.
I was actually thinking that very thing this morning. Whatever is said today, next week, like when you air this, may have changed. But you know, that's what I love about this new path is I'm open to change now. You know, 5 years ago, I'd hung on to those same beliefs for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. They didn't change, you know, but now the sky's the limit and I love it. I love it because I can mull over all kinds of things. I don't shut anything down anymore, you know, like, I mean, my brother, he's like his new religion. He left the church when he was 19. So he's been out of the church all of our lives, but he says his religion now is aliens or something, you know, something, you know, he's like, that's my religion. And I'm like,
okay,
I'm interested.
Is he available to come on the podcast? Because
yes, he would probably love it.
That would be really cool.
I love it. I mean, when you think about it, like when I say, my mom used to always tell us, listen to the Holy Ghost when we'd leave to go to school.
Yes,
and I go to say that to my girls now, and I'm like, that sounds really weird for other people to hear, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, and I personally, I tell them now, like, listen to your intuition. But it made me think like cute. There's so many things like verbiage in our religion that sounds so obscure to people. And so it does. So now when I hear about a religion on aliens, I think, well, we believe in a ghost that follows us around and helps us decide what to do. So there's really nothing that I will roll my eyes at anymore.
Right. I love it. It's freeing and it's exciting because I might learn some new things that move me on my journey.
Yes. Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
So how did Edge of Inside come about?
Well, and you guys probably understand this, but when you're deconstructing, it's disconcerting. You know, you suddenly like, I never in my, you know, wildest dreams thought I would leave the church ever. And when I started to feel that unraveling, you know, I'm like, I just needed a place to write it down. And I'm not a journaler or anything. I was more like a social media person. So I just like, I'm just going to start an incognito account because heaven knows I don't want anybody to know what I'm actually thinking, but I got to get this out, you know, I got to say it. So, you know, and I was following other accounts like Mindful Faith and I'm trying to think who else. There were others, you know, were kind of able to be honest. And they were also incognito. Some people weren't. I just needed to get it down. And I always said to my husband, I wish I could write. I wish I was a writer. I wish I had, you know, and I'm not. But it felt good to pretend and to try. And if I keep it short, it's okay.
Great writer.
Thank you. I'm really not very talented, but it felt good to that little dream that I wished I had been a journalist or I wish I'd, you know, something. So it felt like kind of two things at once. I could vent and I could kind of practice writing, I guess, because I just always kind of had wanted to. So that's just what happened. And I remember telling my son, okay, I'm starting a new account. And I hit send, and I would text him, I sent it out, like, oh, I got 1 like, oh, I got 7 like,
Yes,
and it was shocking to me that actually I was getting, I did not, I just thought I was going into the void, and I didn't care. I wasn't looking for, but people were following me and interacting with me, and and then I started meeting people, like making friends in this community. Like I've got real friends here.
Yeah. That's so great.
Yeah.
And you're an amazing writer. I recently have tried to like think, okay, I'm going to have some like original thoughts and quotes and like ideas and stuff. It is so hard. That is so hard.
And you know what?
I can repost others things.
They're not original. That's the other thing. I've like write all these things, and I'm thinking, I'm like, and then I go, oh, somebody already wrote that 5 years ago. Oh, somebody, we're all going through the same thing. So, I was thinking I was pretty original, and then I look like, oh.
No, but there's always someone who needs your specific
right.
voice.
Yeah. Or the timing. That time.
Absolutely.
Like Mindful Faith started just shortly before I did, maybe 6 months or a year. I don't know. That was the timing I needed to see that account. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
5 years ago, I wasn't around. So, there's new people needing this all the time. So Refined. Yes. And then there are people like, I'm over it. I'm done. See you, Instagram. I don't need this anymore. I've moved on.
Yes, they've healed and processed. And I think that even if we're saying the same things, at least they're still being said. Yeah. I think it's important, especially for some of these topics that are a source of struggle for many members. I think that, if we're silent on these things, like there are so many things in our church's history specifically that wouldn't have come to fruition without people speaking up and talking about it. And maybe they still would have, but it would have taken a lot longer. Yeah. Public opinion is important.
It is. And also just not feeling alone. Like, oh, I'm not, I have so many people come into my DMs and like, I'm so glad I found your account. I felt so alone. I'm like, there's a lot of us out here, and this is a great little community of venting together and holding space for each other and
absolutely
just understanding. Yeah,
I think this is probably a hard question, but if you had power to implement one change within the church, what would it be within the LDS Church?
Okay, so that is a really hard question, and it's hard for a couple of reasons. But my first instinct is immediately like gay marriage, temple ceilings for LGBTQ. I want, that's my immediate go-to. But if you kind of think through that a little bit, it's just going to create more problems because it doesn't help you still got the gender binary. So where are the trans people and the non-binary people fitting? You still got Relief Society. You still got Elders Quorum. You've still got, now you have 2 women married and no priesthood in their home, right? So you're not solving, so in order to actually solve the problem, I think, is give women the priesthood. When we're making decisions, all those problems would be, women would just find ways to be inclusive. I love men. My husband was a feminist well before I ever was. So there are wonderful men out there, but women in decision-making places in the church, at the table, I think if women had been at the table, the proclamation of the family would look a lot different. So I think the biggest thing would giving women a voice, a true authoritative voice, would probably have the most impact.
Yeah, that's interesting that you said that is what needs to change for other things to change.
Yeah.
I've never thought of it that way. But that does make sense. I can't remember where I read this, but somebody said that the reason the church can't let trans members have, or I guess aren't as accepting to trans members, is because if they give a trans man the priesthood, are they giving it to a woman or a man, depending on who you talk to? And that, and I never thought of it that way. And that post kind of really blew my mind a little bit, because it's kind of like you mentioned, what would that mean for the priesthood in our church? It's a very interesting topic. All of these things are very, very fascinating to me.
It really is. And I think that's why the proclamation on the family is really important to a lot of people, including the first presidency, because they don't want to deal with that, any of that. They just want gender is essential, the man and the woman, the marriage. They just want to they don't want to muddy the waters because it messes up all kinds of things in the church. I mean, it's just going to have a ripple effect that I don't know how the church is ever going to be able to change in a real meaningful way. Because, now you're seeing online the discussions about Heavenly Mother and how it's still cis hetero, like you've got the husband and the wife and it still doesn't help trans people or non-binary people see themselves in deity. And we're still working under the patriarchy, everything we're doing basically. So maybe getting women in positions where maybe it's not so patriarchal anymore.
Yeah. And I think, yes, like you mentioned before, if you started with women, so many other things could change down the trickle effect. It's all it's a heavy topic, and I have a lot of thoughts and feelings on it. And so it's just really interesting to talk to you and get your perspective on it. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, it's really, thank you. It is heavy. And for me, basically, is I don't think anything could change to actually bring me back at this point. It was part of my journey. I've moved on, and I'd love it to be better for the people that are in it, but
yeah, you're on your own spiritual path. Yeah. And you're happy in it. And that's exactly what we want for everyone.
Yeah. It is. And it's just, it was a great path at the time. There are things, I have regrets, there are things that we learn in the church that we do as members that, I'm sorry for what I said or what I thought or what I did when I believed what I believed, but that's life. We do that in and outside of church. We have beliefs about all kinds of things.
Yeah. Very
and
true.
I do think people speaking out with what they believe really does make a difference. I recently had some information from somebody that they swore me to secrecy and said, you can't tell this, but
tell us.
But it was it was just information that the church is more involved in certain organizations or more aware of things than we even realize, and they're hearing these things. They're hearing the things that people are struggling with, and the account with the women in the church and the priesthood or just women in the church in general, like that whole thing. The church saw that, and the fact that they acknowledged it and had any sort of type of apologetic text, I think was a really big step, because in the past that hasn't happened. So I think there are small steps being taken, but it's true. Like, it's a big ship to turn, and a lot of, and it's very general. Like there are so many little facets to the church, and because it is worldwide. And so, I'm actually impressed with the little steps that are being taken. And I hope that for my kids, my grandkids and their grandkids and, down the line, I think it's going to take a lot of time. But I think that eventually, I hope that it will all come back to just being Christ-like and kind of focusing on what Christ did. Christ fulfilled the Mosaic law. And then he said, this is the new law, to love your neighbor and love yourself and love God, Like, I hope that things can be kind of stripped down at some point and just focused there.
It could be so simple. It's just, love is beautiful. Just being kind and loving is a beautiful thing. And I really appreciate that you said that, because it is getting better. They keep changing things that are hard and painful to make them less hard and less painful, honestly. And they can't, women are never going to get the priesthood. I never say never, but, they would lose. Imagine the church, who would leave?
Yeah.
There would be people that how could you do that? Because it's doctrine and, so they can't, their hands are tied to some degree.
Sure.
with big things, but the little things, and I think that's some of the frustration that the women who were speaking out last week had was, can we not just sit on the stand? I mean, we're just asking for little things. We're not asking to be ordained. We're just asking for little things. And the little things are something to celebrate. And I think you're absolutely right. The fact that they acknowledged it and that those comments are back and still up and growing by the minute, that's all a big plus.
Amen. And it's got to start somewhere. And those conversations are so important to be had.
They are.
Yeah. You volunteer at the Trevor Project. Explain what you do there and how long have you been there? Just tell us a little bit. What drew you to the organization specifically?
Okay. So the Trevor Project, I've been there for over 2 years, and I'm a crisis counselor, and they have the Lifeline, which is phone calls, and they have the digital counselors, which are typing, texting, and I chose to be a digital counselor because I don't think real fast on my feet. And, if they're typing, you got time to research things and open tabs. And, I just felt like I would be better if I had a little time to just deal with it. So I trained as a digital counselor. So I take a shift 3 hours a week, and you get online and calls just come in. And sometimes 6 or 7 or 8 will come in at once, and you just I usually pick the one it'll say how long they've been waiting, so I'll pick the one that's been waiting the longest, click it, open it up. You start, we have a little thing we say when we start, and then they just share what's going on. And we spend typically 45 minutes to an hour with each one, unless they're imminent suicide, then there's no time limit. And you just stay on as long as you can. But we get training. So there's 40 hours of training, and it's excellent training. I wish I'd had it years ago. I'd have been a much better mother, much better parent. So that's what I do. So crisis counselor, and it's an LGBTQ suicide hotline, basically, is what it is. So you're assuming that everyone, and it's ages 12 to 24 is who it's designed for. I've had 11-year-olds on there. A lot of them are very young. And these kids, I'm telling you, they are sharp and smart and witty and intelligent. And I love them so much. And it's heartbreaking and it's painful. And sometimes it's rewarding and fun. Sometimes they're just funny. And, it's just a mixed bag. It's a mixed bag, and it's scary every time. Like, wow. Every now and then there'll be like no calls, and I'll be like, oh, yes, no calls.
Yeah, yay. That's true. That's something to celebrate. Yes.
It is.
Oh my gosh.
And then there'll be surges, and we'll get emails and texts. It's like, there's like so many calls. Can extra people come and jump on right now to help take them, So, anyway, so I found it through an ad on Facebook, I think. It was like, Trevor Project needs volunteers. And I'd seen it a few times, and it just had always kind of tugged at me. And then when I knew I was winding down seminary and I was going to resign my calling, I'm like, that's my new calling. I'm giving myself a calling.
I love that so much.
So I gave myself a calling, and I turned down everything else, said, nope, I'm good. So that's my calling now.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's inspiring.
And I love it and I hate it.
And I was just going to say, that's inspiring and beautiful and awful and and all of the things, like all of those emotions.
It is all of the things. And I really have to psych myself up. And there are days where it's over and I'm like, that was so fun. That was so great. That felt so good. And it was rewarding. And there are days like it didn't go well, or someone was suicidal, or, it's just, you just never know.
Yeah.
So like, there's always anxiety before my shift. Like,
I can't even imagine the emotions and the weight of that, but how rewarding that is.
It is.
I feel like I'm going to cry, but
I know. I cry about it.
I can't even imagine.
Not all the time, but yeah, especially when it's like, the parents, like, just want to, I want to go hug you, and I want to save you from, your mean mother who won't listen to you, or, whatever it is. And it's just heartbreaking. One young man who's like probably 14, junior high, living in a shelter with his mom and a 4-year-old and a baby, and he was trying to do school and trying to take care of the kids and try to, and it's like, we can't solve their problems.
Right.
But, you're there to listen and help them solve their problems or whatever. But, it can be really, really, really heart-wrenching.
I bet.
Well, and there are just so many people in need of just someone to listen to them. I think and I've said this for years, that I really feel like everyone could benefit from a therapist. And so
yes.
I feel like you are kind of that for them.
That's
and
for sure.
And it's free, and they can call whenever they need. Like, what an important calling. And I love that you called it a calling, because I think it's so important for people to realize that there are so many callings outside of church.
Yes. Yes.
That's huge.
For a long time, that was a little bit of my pet peeve, because we are so insular as a Latter-day Saint people. Like, we're so busy with activity days and scouts and young men and young women in seminary and ward this and the activity that, and like, we don't have time to volunteer in the community. I'm so amazed when LDS people can get out in the community as well, because when do you do that?
True.
And it's like, it almost feels like a vicious circle of just serving ourselves, and a lot of us aren't in that much need, more just like, taking care of teaching each other's kids how to make cookies or tie knots, and like, there's so many things that, I mean, I'm not disparaging it, because I benefited from it, my kids benefited from it, great people, but it's almost a cycle that's hard to get out of. And it's hard to get out into the community when you're so busy.
And why can't both things exist more? Like, just adding to it, still doing those activities, but adding to it, going and feeding the homeless, or doing more service oriented projects.
That are outside of our
we do
immediate
that.
Community. But you're right. A lot of times it's we're serving just our ward members right here and over again. Which is valuable, but I wish they could get out. We could get out of that community sometimes. Are the parents ever supportive, or is it usually like they're calling because they can't talk to their parents?
It's all over the board. Many of them have supportive parents. Many of them.
Good.
And I'm going to say a lot of them aren't calling about LGBTQ issues at all. I think I know, which is interesting, right? They're just calling about regular problems. But, I think maybe they feel safe because they are LGBTQ. I don't even know, half the time. I don't even know if they, if they fill out the form that they fill out as they call in and says, but sometimes it doesn't even come up the LGBTQ stuff at all.
Sometimes they just need a friend.
And oftentimes they're in unsupportive homes, but I'll say, "What is your mom supportive?" "Oh yeah, my mom's fine with that." But she's not letting me go because I didn't do my homework. I'm like, so you just get all kinds of stuff.
Right.
Just get all kinds of stuff.
Interesting.
They might just need a friend or someone to hear them out.
Right.
I would love to do something like that sometime.
It is really cool. I mean, it takes a
awesome.
little bit of time, but if you don't have a church calling, it's, I can fit 3 hours a weekend. I was teaching seminary 5 mornings a week. So
we met you at Tiffany Sobey's house at a little meet and greet that we mentioned earlier. And we obviously love talking to you and your husband. And that is where you first mentioned to us that you were going to a different church. So we were just curious if you could share with us which church it is and what drew you to it.
Okay. And I had to write something down because I wanted you to hear what drew. My husband is the one that did the research on this. I got to find this. Here it is. So it's called the First Congregational United Church of Christ, but it's UCC is what it goes by, just the UCC. Okay. And I find that the UCC is pretty common in small towns. I mean, it's in big cities as well, but they're everywhere. They're like, we've got little towns all around us that have a UCC, It's just interesting. So there's like 3 UCCs just, in our, not that far from us.
Okay.
But my husband, so I don't know why he really likes church. He just, I'm all about, just give me a second Saturday. I'm loving this. Just, nature really is like church for me. I don't really need right now. I mean, just right now, need to go to a building to worship. But my husband really does. And I love him and I want to support him, and it's not going to hurt me to go.
Sure.
So he was looking online at all the churches in our town, and he found this one that said, "We are open and affirming toward LGBTQ people of faith. We are followers of Jesus, our prime spiritual guide, yet we have a variety of understanding of who this Christ is. Join us so we can explore together."
Oh,
Like,
wow.
Like, if you still want to love on Jesus and you still want to go to church and you love the LGBTQ plus community,
Sign me up.
right? Right. So I'm like, okay, I can do that. I can do that. And so the first Sunday that we went, the pastor was a woman. She's from, I think, South Korea. Her descent, her parents are Korean. She was a woman, so that was
Already you're like, this is refreshing.
oh. And there was a pride banner on the wall. And then every Sunday they read a statement of inclusion. I should have it memorized by now, but no matter who you are or what path you're on, you are always welcome here. Something like that. And they read it, the whole congregation reads it together at the beginning of every service.
That'd be
and
so
I started
powerful.
crying. I started crying.
So sweet and unifying, no matter who you are.
No
I
matter
love
who
that.
you are or where you are in life's journey, I think is what they say. You are always welcome here. And it just, I cried.
That's
I'm
beautiful.
like, oh, I'm home, you know?
Yeah.
And there's this lovely lesbian couple who've been there for, I don't know, 15 years. And they joined because they wanted to get married and no other church in town would marry them, but that church did, and they've never left. And they're just, it's just wonderful. It's just wonderful, you know? So, and then, you know, they've become our community. My husband, again, is Mr. Social, you know, we're friends with everybody there. And here I'm singing in the choir, and we're serving the Friday home. They do our town is so great. The other churches in town, they do free lunch every day of the week, or at least 4 days a week, maybe all 5 days. A different church in town does a free lunch. And our church does Fridays. So now we're serving lunches on Fridays, and we're just all in again,
I love that.
I'm trying not to be too much. Like I'm like, look, sometimes my husband just does the lunches. I'm like, I'm not doing that this week. So I do desserts once a month. I'm in charge of the desserts once a month, and I'm like, I can do that. Singing in the choir for Easter, I can do that. Baby steps, but I'm starting to feel a little sucked in again.
You're like, dang it, you sucked me in.
My Sundays open, and
I wanted to go to the beach.
Yes.
But just lovely people, lovely people, and it's great.
I want to be in your town. Like, it sounds like your town is just.
It really is a cool town. Super conservative, but we found our little pockets, and it's just been a really, really good little town. We picked it. We started our own business to work from home, and so that we could live wherever we wanted. And this is where we ended up, which is so interesting. We felt guided.
Yeah.
I mean, my entire life, I've always felt like I had the Holy Ghost is what I was taught. The Holy Ghost really has always guided me. I don't like to call it that anymore. I'm really trying to divest from all the, like you said, intuition or, the universe or, whatever. But we felt guided here. We just really did. And it's just been.
Sounds very meant to be.
Beautiful. Yeah.
That sounds like an amazing community. I'm the same, Emmy. I'm like,
yeah.
maybe we
really
just
like it.
need to come and visit at least.
Please do. You are welcome here.
We love
no
visiting.
matter who you are or where your path is, you are welcome.
My
here.
heart. I got like chills when you first said that, because
I did too.
I think we claim that in the LDS church, but like the reminder every week would be amazing, Like,
I know.
It's just a great reminder.
They were also reading, when we first started, they were reading a statement of land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are using the land of the Colville Indian tribe, that we, and they did that for a while, but then I think this past year they decided that they took it out because they decided it was just sort of too passive, that we needed to be more active in some ways. So I miss it. I liked it. I thought it was important to be reminded, but
that is beautiful. Yeah.
But in the UCC church, their meetings are every Wednesday, I think, and everyone is welcome to come and participate. So so if we wanted to push for something to change in there, our voices are welcome.
Yes.
So it's really cool.
Yeah, I love that line that you mentioned, we're here to explore together.
Yes.
That line really stood out to me because that is my favorite. Those are my favorite Relief Society meetings where the conversation gets steered to a completely different way and everyone is just sharing their point of view. Those are my favorite lessons because we're exploring together.
It is. And when you feel safe enough to do that, you're in a good room, a good group. Sometimes you're, depending on your ward or where you live, sometimes you just like, I'm not comfortable saying that. But when you get in a place where you can, or there's always one person who doesn't care and they just say it, and then it makes everybody, if you can say it, maybe I can say it, you know?
Right. It can start the chain effect.
Right. And then we can really just be vulnerable and not so superficial with each other. And even if we don't agree, it's like you feel more connected.
Yes. Yeah.
So that exploring is good.
Yes. We don't have to fully agree, but just the conversations are so needed. Like when we take our masks off at church and it just takes one person to take their mask off and then the rest of us will put them down slowly. And that's where the real vulnerable and real genuine conversations start to happen.
Right. And if we can hang on to millennials and Gen Zs, those are the people that are taking their masks off.
Amen.
I just feel like the young people are the older you get, the more, proper. And, when I was Relief Society president, they had started, I don't even know if you guys remember this, sitting in circles. We had to sit in circles in Relief Society and Elders Quorum and start like talking to each other about stuff, and I'm telling you what, the older ladies, they hated that. They hated that. And the younger ladies loved it,
I loved it. Yeah, I loved it. And I wondered this a few months ago. I was like, when did we change that and why?
Yeah.
But now maybe we know why. No. Maybe there were some complaints happening.
I was so excited about it, and it didn't last very long.
It was stressful as a Relief Society president because we were balancing the older ladies who I knew did not like it, and people were so mad that the chairs were in a circle, and they were just it was rough. But they'd say, these young ladies are just airing their dirty laundry and we don't want to hear it. You're like, no, they're being vulnerable.
Yes.
Oh man, that's so sad.
I've tried to do that in my class, but we're now in the chapel, so I'm like, I don't know how to facilitate that.
It's true. But I know the chapel is hard for Sunday school. It's just, you just can't get the buy-in. People are in the back and on the sides, and it's like you try to tell them to move up and they hate that and they won't do it. I hated it and I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, I know. Well, and it makes you more scared to comment, like, I'm in the chapel.
Yeah. Well, and no one can hear you, and people are trying to pass around microphones, and it's just tough. It is really tough. I admire you for trying.
Yeah, I still try once in a while. So you said that that they talk about Christ, and the point is kind of like, if you're an LGBTQ ally and you still want to talk about Christ, do you feel like that's true? We've been to a couple different churches where I feel like one, the focus really was Christ, and the other not as much. It was more about like your personal spirituality, which both were great. But I'm just curious, is this church that you're in now, what is the focus? Do you feel like?
So I'm LDS through and through. I don't know anything about other churches, but it seems to me that they follow the liturgical calendar like maybe Episcopalians. And so they basically just do a reading, and it seems like it's the same reading that some other Protestant churches are doing. Okay. So they'll read like Mark 1:12 to 18 or whatever, and then pastor just gives a sermon about it. So far, they're mostly Christ-centered. It's about, we're doing New Testament. I don't know if they do the Old Testament. I really don't know beyond that. But they follow, like, they'll say, this is, Palm Sunday, and this is whatever Sunday. I just go and do whatever they say, read whatever they say, and so the pastor gives a sermon on the reading from the Bible. So that's basically it. Now they've started this year in our congregation doing this. It feels like a Relief Society thing, kind of like a let's talk. And they give you a little topic before the sermon that basically what the sermon's going to be about. And you have to go find somebody in the congregation and share with them your thoughts on it for a few minutes.
Interesting.
So they all make us, in Relief Society, they'll make us get up and find your group. And I used to just, but so I was, find somebody and talk for a few minutes, but it's actually very interesting.
Yeah.
And then we sit down and then she gives a sermon and be like, oh yeah, that's kind of what we were saying. And, so it's cool.
That's really cool.
I like that.
Very community focused.
And then at the end, in our congregation, which I don't think is normal, but it's a very small congregation, at the end, we all go up to the front and hold hands and kind of say a benediction type thing. So it's sweet.
I love
it's really
that.
sweet.
It's beautiful.
It's so cute.
That is like,
It's really
how
and they
connecting.
have coffee and cake and cookies after, and it's all good.
I'm in.
I know, right?
I know.
Wow.
I love
That is so beautiful.
Yeah, how community based it feels like your community is just as a whole. And we keep talking about this, but
It is.
I love it. That's awesome.
Yeah, they're going to paint the church outside on Monday, so my husband has to go paint. I'm not going to do that.
Oh,
Let him do
I'm really
that.
good at saying no for stuff now. I'm like,
that's awesome.
Good for you.
Good
and
for you.
I know.
And something that struck me that just popped into my head earlier when you were saying that your husband is more social and needs church, maybe, or maybe needs the more structural side
he
of
likes
church.
ritual and he likes the structure. And
There was a quote that I heard about talking about different plants and that, a cactus needs less water than a flower, but they're both healthy and strong in their own way, and I felt like that they related that to spirituality, that every plant needs a certain type of sunlight or more water, less water, or different soil. And it really is, it goes to show that like our spiritualities are so unique, and some of us don't need that structure every single week. Some of us gain more spiritual power, or we can worship easier in nature or on the beach or even in a book club. There's community found in book clubs, and I don't know, it really struck me because me and my husband are like you but flipped. I'm the social and he does better on his own, and yet we both understand that our needs can be met in different ways.
Yes, and that's why this journey to me has been so enlightening, because I used to think everybody had to have the same path. And if they weren't on the same path, oh my, oh gosh, I'm worried about them, and they're not going to be as happy. Without being, we need all the water. Like you said, everybody needs all the water. I'm a cactus. Sorry.
Yep.
Beautiful cactus. Yes, exactly. I wholeheartedly agree with
I bloom at Christmas. This is perfect.
Yeah, we all take our own paths, and each person's path is different. Like every single human being's spiritual path is different, and I think it's so important to respect that.
100% agree.
Yeah. And no judgment, and no trying to say like, well, this worked for me, it should work for you. Like we don't know that. You can say this worked for me, it might work for you, but I don't know that.
100%. Right. Everybody's paradigms. I mean, our whole lives, no two lives are alike.
Right.
Yep. Exactly. So what was your most powerful experience within the LDS Church, and what has been your most powerful experience outside of it?
Yeah, I haven't been outside that long, but like I said earlier, like the Holy Ghost or the Spirit or the universe or deity or something higher has always, I've just connected with that since probably junior high or high school. I just have always felt like I had connection. And to me, really, I considered it Jesus in a lot of ways, the Holy Ghost speaking for Jesus, whatever. It was just always kind of Jesus through the Spirit.
Yeah.
So I don't know that I ever, I had beautiful, good experiences in church and in the temple or whatever, but the most powerful experiences I had would be in prayer. just in prayer. And the first time I'll never forget this because it started me on a journey of connecting with Jesus like I never had, but I was like a young 20s, I guess. I was married, but I was in a primary presidency and I had to do a sharing time. And this is, way back, I don't know. I just remember like there's no lesson manual. We just had to do a 20-minute sharing time with these kids. And I felt like I had to make it up. I don't really know why. I can't remember why it was like that, but like we had nothing. And I was panicked. I was young. I'd never really done that. And I had all these kids. And so I just got on my knees and I prayed, dear Heavenly Father, I think we had a topic or something, but we didn't. I'm like, how am I going to do this? Please help me figure out how to do this. And I got some kind of answer, like right then and there. And I was like, and I said, so I said, and I said something back and I got another answer and we communicated for a few minutes. And then I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I had it all solved. And I'm like, I just like had a conversation, a two-way conversation. Wow. And I've never, ever experienced that. And the sharing time was good. And people are like, ooh, that was really good. How'd you come up with that? I'm like, God, I'm the Holy Ghost. But once that happened, like then I was like, this is a thing. I can do this. And so from then on, I literally just had conversations. And I've never, ever lost that. Except for, so I've used that my whole life in really small ways and in really big and important ways. Yeah. And I would even use it for my husband because he wouldn't stop to pray. And I'd just do it for him. Like, hang on, I got this, I'd go talk to God and then tell Bob, tell my husband the answer. And, it was literally just a thing. And I would hear him like working on something and he couldn't solve it and he's getting mad and I'd say a prayer and then I'd say, just enlighten his mind. God, please just tell him the answer. And like 5 minutes later, it's like, oh, I figured it out. I'm like, yeah.
That's amazing.
Wow. So that was just me and God. We just had a thing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So it didn't always work, didn't always work, but it really, I relied on it a lot. And since I've deconstructed, I've, struggling, who's God? What does God look like? I don't see him the way the Mormon church has explained him to me. Is it a she? Is it, so actually praying and connecting has been hard because I lost the vision.
Sure.
And I don't blame my leaving the church for that. And I don't blame God for that. I'm just trying to find my compass or the middle.
Yeah. Like the visual of who you're talking to.
Yeah. And for some reason I've done that for so long. I need that, but I don't want the one I had. So I'm maybe I'm being stubborn. You know what I mean? Maybe I'm just being stubborn. I don't want to talk to that God. I want to talk to a different God. Yeah. So I'm and I was on the phone with a friend who's left the church and she's really struggling and she was going through the same thing. She said, I don't know how to pray. I don't know. And she said, but I was really desperate this morning and I just prayed the old way. And she said, and the answer was for me to call you. And I'm like, okay. So she called me. And so I'm like, if I really need something, I can pray to the old white-haired, white-bearded, and he'll be there. It's fine.
Yeah.
I just don't want to pray to that guy.
Right.
So
you're trying
what to do.
To figure out what your actual image is. And I'm so glad you said that. And we're so honest about it because I think that takes some vulnerability to admit those things. And I was in the same place. Like I remember we went to Europe 2 years ago. It was the first time I'd ever been. And we went to Ireland and I have never felt the Spirit. I mean, I could cry just talking about it. The Spirit was so strong, which goes to the testament of nature, being in this gorgeous, we were at the cliffs of Moher and we were on these gorgeous black cliffs with green fields and the blue ocean. And I felt Heavenly Mother and I had never before. And I remember for months before that, there was conversation online about Heavenly Mother. And I was like, I don't know. I don't think I've ever felt that chick.
Right.
And I was getting jealous actually of some of the posts and stories. And I thought, wow, I've never had that. And I don't know what it was being there, but and it wasn't just her. I actually felt her and Heavenly Father and Jesus so strong.
Oh, I love it.
And I just wept. I mean, it was
She
kind
would
of
not stop
embarrassing.
crying. I was like, girl.
She's like, get a hold of yourself.
Wow,
It
that's so beautiful.
It was such a beautiful experience.
It was.
And I sometimes still picture what I used to picture as God, but most of the time now I picture a man and a woman kind of in a blurry image, and their arms are extended out like they're hugging, but there's like a world in between them. And I don't know. I'm so glad I have that image now,
sweet.
but it didn't happen right away. And I could admit now, especially, that like I was jealous that other people had those images and those feelings. And I just thought, I guess it's not my thing.
Isn't
but
it interesting how it
each other.
just suddenly came to you though?
Mm-hmm.
Like that makes me feel hopeful. Like I'm going to get that one of these days.
Yeah, I think it has to be your own, though. It has to be genuine to you. Yeah,
It does, because we can't be prescriptive about it. You know, some people have a lot of gods, and that's great. I think all of it is just meaning making. It's stories that we tell ourselves, and we have to find the right story for us.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm still trying to, figure out. I mean, I'll look at other pictures of deity online. I'm like, is it that one? Is it that one? I'm like, I just haven't connected yet, but I'm going to go to Ireland soon. Then
That's what you need.
That happens.
It'll happen. It didn't happen for me there.
You can have an excuse to go to Ireland.
Well, you're going to have to go somewhere else, Emily.
Yeah.
Yep.
I did love it. Paris is my place. That's probably, if I were seeking for that, that's where it would happen. Because that's like where my soul exists, I think.
Religion
My
is in a
soul is on
croissant in
Big
Paris.
island of Hawaii. That's where my soul is.
Hawaii.
We do love Hawaii.
Hawaii is just not even, I feel like it's heaven. It's not even part of this world.
Yeah, I know. I was just going to mention briefly, Patrick Mason just started a new podcast produced by Faith Matters.
I heard about that.
Did you? I just discovered it. We're actually interviewing him tomorrow. And I know he's so amazing and we're so excited, so I've been like kind of prepping for it a little bit. And just yesterday I'm like, oh, he has his own podcast. I had no idea. But anyway, I heard the last episode and it was so good. And they had a specialist on there. Her name is Emily. And she was talking about, at the end of the episode, she was talking about how she has conversations with God. And I really liked how she said it. And I maybe this is just what I heard. Maybe it's totally different. But it was something like, she said, I have pretend conversations, like I make up conversations with God, and it helps her to feel connected. And I was like, I love that, because sometimes I feel like I'm just not in a connected place and I can't get myself there. But I really like the idea of just having a pretend conversation, even if I might look crazy, but even if it's just like while I'm driving in my car, just kind of having a back and forth and even pretending that he's answering. I've never had that. I've had some really spiritual experiences in my life, but I've never had a like conversation type experience like you're explaining.
Right.
But I like the idea of that. I like the idea of even like pretending just to get my thoughts out. I'm not a big journaler either. And I think if I were, that would help me to just like just in general, in life in general, and a therapist would be great too. But I think journaling can do a similar thing, but I'm just not going to do that probably. So I can talk to myself in the car though, or I can talk to God in the car, and I do talk to God in the car. Like I do, but I've never had like a back and forth,
you
where
should
he's responding to me.
At least do it in the grocery store to give other people a show.
Some entertainment.
Well, I'm telling you, that's just a form of prayer, and and you will get conversation back, even if it's pretend. I talk to myself like that in the car. Like it's I'm like, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I mean, I didn't even realize I'm doing it. And then I'm looking around, but luckily, how many people are like on earbuds talking on the phone. You just see people walking around talking to themselves all the time now. So we don't look crazy.
Just do it. Yeah, it's true.
Just make sure your earbuds are in or whatever, or you're holding your phone up, to your face.
Yes.
But I think that's just a beautiful form of prayer. Even if it's pretend, it's you talking to
it's still happening.
The great out there, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it. I love it.
And I
do
really
too.
believe in prayer. And I've had
Yes,
so
me
many
too.
answers to prayer and
Me
very
too.
like specific and direct answers to prayer. I feel like I can pray. If I need a friend, I'll pray for the specific friend I need and she'll be there tomorrow.
Oh,
like,
wow.
like that's
Wow.
always been very consistent in my life. And I mean, many things like that. So I'm glad
And that's such a gift because not everybody has that. I mean, a lot of people are like, I've never felt that. I've never experienced that. And that's, you know, they've got to find their own way. You know, we all have to find our own way.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
trying different things like talking to yourself in the car or, you know,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, we all have to find our own way. Just sitting in nature, crying in Ireland. You know, we all have different ways of being touched by.
Yeah. It's so true. And I do, like, I've definitely had prayers answered, but also I would say more often than not, my prayers at night, I just think about so many people that I love. Sometimes I do this weird, like when I'm really tired, I'll do like a montage prayer, like in a movie where it just flashes of pictures. I'll just picture people I love until I fall asleep. And if anything, it reminds me like, oh, I need to call her tomorrow. Oh, I've been thinking about him. And, you know, I believe too in just the energy, like even me thinking about them, because I've had that before where somebody said, I was thinking about you. And I was like, I felt that. I actually could feel you this week. And so I believe in that kinetic energy or whatever you want to call it. But also it's a good reminder to send a text the next day or check in on a friend or, you know, most of the time I forget. And then the next night I'm like, dang it, I'm praying about him again. I forgot.
I know. And it's funny because sometimes when you do that, you know, you find out that there was a reason.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's not. But, you know, I had this sweet lady in our ward. She doesn't have internet or anything, but she has a landline. And every now and then she'll just call me and say, is everything okay? You just came to my mind today, you know? And it just, I'm like, well, everything's great now. You know, you just made my day. But, you know, so I think it's neat that you would, you know, when those things come to us that we're connected. We're all connected and that they're, no matter where it's coming from, it just reminds you to connect.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's one of the most beautiful things that, you know, like in the world is just connecting with people, connecting with each other.
Amen.
And yeah.
That's kind of, I think, why we started this podcast. Like my initial thought was, I want to connect with people. And this has been a great way to do that. I love it so much. I used to teach, sorry, just on the prayer topic, because I love the topic of prayer. But when I used to teach young women's, and similar to you, Ashley, I kind of do something kind of similar to that. I was telling them that usually it's in the shower. I will think of people, but I don't think of them. I like feel them. Like it's almost like the feeling of you. Like I know how you feel to me, and the love I have for you feels a certain way. The love I feel for my husband feels a certain way. And so I like go through like a collage of people, but the feeling that they have. And I feel like I connect to God in a way through that, in that way as well. And I feel like he or she or it or whatever, they can feel that, you know, it doesn't have to be words that are spoken in your mind, you know? And I feel like that's when I feel the most connected. And maybe it's women are, you know, more emotion driven. I'm at least more emotion driven. And I feel like most connected to people and to God and a greater power when I am feeling, you know, and it's so, I feel like that I feel the most loved, and it feels the most intense maybe is the right word.
I love that.
I think when I told the young women that, the leaders kind of looked at me like I was crazy, but the young women liked it.
I was going to say, I bet you those girls
the younger generation know what's up. They know what's up.
They do know what's up. And, you know, growing up in the church, where I was like, you have been saved for the last days. You're the most valiant. And they've been saying that forever. But it gets truer and truer with every generation.
That is,
and it's like,
they're so smart.
To listen to them. Yeah.
And so much empathy. I think like their generation, they have like the strongest empathy, and it makes me, like you mentioned before, it makes me hopeful that at least we have some very empathetic people coming up into the future, because we need it. We need it more than ever.
They don't care if you're black, white, straight, gay, you know, I mean, you know, in general, general, they're just so open and loving to everybody. And it just gives me a lot of hope. It's just such a great, you know, idea that you had to just because there's so, like when my daughter said, I don't believe in the church and I think Joseph Smith, my husband's like, well, why don't you consider looking into, had your podcast been around, I would have said, here, try this episode, try that episode,
That is so sweet of you.
It would have been great
That means
for
so
her.
much
So
to us.
it's good.
Yeah.
It's good that people can find out more. It's not always easy to just up and go to another church, but you kind of make it accessible without being scary.
That's kind of is our goal, is to go to other churches for people.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I just was so excited when Emmy came to me with the idea, and it's really been her baby, and it's been like, it's just, I was immediately on board. I was like, yes, that is needed.
I love it. And coming from an LDS background, a little timid to go to another church because you're afraid that their missionaries might get you.
Oh, sure.
Most of them aren't like that.
Right.
But like if I show up in person, will they leave, will I be able to get out of there and not be bugged?
Yeah.
So to listen to it on a podcast is, quite safe.
Yeah,
good.
it's true. It's
Yes,
intimidating for
I
sure.
agree.
And it's
Yeah, for
helpful
sure.
going together. I don't know if I'd be
I love that.
strong enough or confident enough to go by myself. What are some little things that bring you joy and purpose to your everyday life?
Okay. Little things that bring, it's not little, but just connections, people. Like my Instagram friends, I've got friends on there now that, we schedule weekly video calls or monthly video calls, or I've got one that I've gone on 2 weekends with a friend, that I met on Instagram. Some people who don't understand social media are like, that's so weird, like,
so cool.
they're my friends now. And I
yeah.
love the connections. I've met so many people in person now from Instagram, and then just my friends, like just socializing, going to dinner with some friends tonight, went to, so those things are meaningful. Even though I want to pretend I'm an introvert, I'm doing a lot of extrovert things. So I like those are meaningful. And then just my dogs just make me happy. My little puppies. What other things? What was the question? Just little things that bring me joy.
Little things that bring joy or purpose to your everyday.
Yeah. Well,
and I think you nailed it.
My kids, and I love the internet because no matter where they are, they can reach me and I can reach them, and I hear from at least one of them every day, and usually more than one, and it's just meaningful. And my grandkids, and just family, friends, and pets. Those are my things.
Best things.
And then this is dumb, but here's something. I've been saying this to my husband lately. Since we left the church, we started drinking coffee. And I love our little coffee ritual. Like, we have this ritual every morning. We drink 2 different kinds. So he grinds his beans and makes his coffee, and then I go and grind my beans. And it's just this like little dance in the kitchen, and he's making his breakfast, and we don't eat the same, and just every morning, it's just like, I look forward to this coffee and breakfast ritual. I love it. And then we sit at the table, and either we get on our phones and read, or somebody finds something on social media and we start, can you believe this? And talk about it for a while, but it's just that ritual is really, I love it. I just love it.
Oh, that is, I love that you call it a ritual, because that's
a coffee ritual.
That is a religious term in a lot of, sense. And yet it is like, I feel the same about my coffee in the morning. The ritual of it. I love that.
Yeah, it is a ritual to me. Yeah.
It is.
That's so
Well,
cute.
thank you for sharing that. Our last little silly fun question, and you have 2 options. You can either tell us an embarrassing story, or you can answer this question. If you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would it be and why?
Well, I'm going to tell you an embarrassing story, and I'll try not to let it be too long, but I said to my husband,
Yay.
I asked my husband about this. He reminded me of this story. So we used to live in Southern California, and I worked at a law firm in Newport Beach. And it was a small law firm, 2 attorneys, 2 secretaries, basically, or paralegal secretary, and then there was like a file clerk or something. So there were 5 of us. And my boss decided that he could fly a plane. Apparently, I guess he'd taken lessons at some point, but he bought a plane. So he's like, I'm going to close the office and fly you guys to Death Valley to a restaurant for lunch. I'm like, okay. And like, okay. I mean, how are you going to say no to that, right?
Right. That's so
clothes
cool.
and work. Everybody's getting on this little 6-seater airplane that he bought, and he's going to fly us to lunch in Death Valley. So we get on this plane, and I'm so proud of myself. Like, oh, I brought my Diet Coke for the flight. And, this will be fun. And like nobody else had theirs. I'm like, I've got my drink. It's all good.
Rub it in.
Well, so my boss, you have to know the man. He was crazy, but he had like binders open, like telling him how to fly the plane, basically.
No.
In his lap. So I'm freaking out a little bit. And then he finds out I don't know, from his binders or on the radio or whatever, that there's military airspace he cannot fly through. He has to fly around. So this 2-hour flight was now going to turn into a 5-hour flight. And my little Diet Coke had gone through me. And I had to go to the bathroom. So bad.
Oh, no.
So bad. And we are like, he had to go around into Nevada. We're in Newport Beach, California. We're supposed to stay in California. He had to go around military airspace. We're in Nevada, and I am like, my eyes are rolling into the back of my head. I have to go so bad. I mean, I'm dying.
Yeah,
I'm like
yeah.
looking at the Diet Coke can, wondering if I can figure out how to use it.
Yeah.
And my boss finds a place to land in Nevada, and this little airstrip at a brothel called the Chicken Ranch.
No.
Yes. He lands this little plane at the Chicken Ranch, and I'm not even coherent at this point. I have to go so bad. He opens the door, and I jump out of the plane, and I literally fall down. I'm like, I can't even function. And I get up. It's just mortifying. And I get up and I run to this bar that's attached to the brothel, and I go inside, and there's men in there playing pool, and and I see these 2 doors, and one says hen and one says roosters. And I am so delirious, I start yelling, do not know which one to use. Am I a rooster or a hen?
You're like, I don't need these kind of questions right now.
I literally can't think. Please don't, I don't know. I don't know which one is for me.
That is
somebody
funny.
helps me to find the right bathroom. And so when we get to lunch, finally we get to the Mojave Desert, the restaurant is closed.
After all that.
Gosh.
After all that.
But nobody was sad because they thought landing the plane at a brothel was the best thing that ever happened in the world. So embarrassing story.
So
Mostly
funny.
it's just like, am I a rooster already?
That is, when you really have to pee, you are delirious.
Oh my gosh.
That
And
is
so my
so
boss,
funny.
he bought a little porta potty for the plane after that.
Oh my gosh.
Good.
I would be terrified when
was awful.
when I saw the binder come out. I would be like,
my gosh.
I want out.
Yeah.
Seriously, he took us sailing one time, and it was the same thing. He didn't know how to sail, and it was just, oh my gosh, the guy
It's like, I'll figure it out.
He's delightful.
You're like, we'll just go to lunch here. We'll go to dinner here.
Oh my
Alan, he
gosh.
flew us to Catalina Island one time, and he couldn't land the plane because it's a very small strip. He had to go around like 5 times to land. I mean, I don't know why I'm still alive.
You're a brave woman to get on the plane more than once.
I was very young. You're immortal
you
back
just
then.
do
Yeah.
That
Adventurous.
is hilarious.
I have a
And-
lot of empathy
Wow.
for this story because I have to pee all the time.
She does. I'm
the
like,
second
Emmy,
I
what are you?
need to-
How much do you drink?
Yeah, the second I need to, I have to go now. Like I think
I can't wait.
I think there's something
Emmy
wrong.
has danced like a little girl, like with her legs together
More
more
often.
times than anyone I know. And every time I'm like, she got pee.
I am
Well,
like a child.
Just so you know, you're a hen. You're a hen.
That's true. She is a hen.
In case I'm in that situation.
In case you
We'll-
ever end up at the Chicken Ranch, you now know.
We'll commit
You
it
are
to
a
it.
hen.
Oh, that's so funny.
Thank you so much for
Well,
sharing.
thank
And
me too.
everything you
Yeah.
said really resonated, and
I'm
we're really
glad.
This
grateful.
podcast is church for me lately. Like I feel like I feel the Spirit doing this more than anything right now.
Right.
So we really do appreciate it, and you have
So
an
this is
amazing
church.
insight, and yeah, it's
church.
That's church.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of That's Church featuring Michelle Peper. We hope her heartfelt story of navigating faith transitions, building community, and finding new meaning has inspired you as much as it inspired us. Be sure to follow Michelle on Instagram at Edge of Inside for more of her reflections and insights of faith, family, and growth. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with friends who might find it meaningful. You can also follow us on Instagram at That's Church Podcast for updates on upcoming episodes, events, and more. Thank you for being part of this journey with us. Until next time, keep asking questions, embracing curiosity, and fostering connections that matter.